So I just want to thank everybody for coming and welcome you. Today we're going to have a really fun conversation about AI and how we as humans interact and what the possibilities and challenges might be in a wide-ranging conversation, I'm sure. But before we go there, I wanted to let you know that Marty Singelman will be back next month on I think it's the 19th um, of September, sharing her next iteration around consciousness and how we're thinking about that. And, some of the interesting, I guess it's going to be September 16th that she'll be doing a call with us. And then Frank is going to come and speak to us on the 21st of October. And then Mary Ellen, you're going to be with us on the 18th of November. Is that correct? No surprises here. I think it's going to be a great lineup. And I and so welcome to everybody. Christine and I met initially through the International Leadership Association, and she comes to our calls, but she also comes to this topic with rich and deep experience. She's kind of a research practitioner, author, leadership strategist, and in my experience, she's always the person who's asking the provocative questions and the deeper questions. And so she provokes how you think about something, and she always brings up the topic that you're talking about from a kind of an unexplored or newer or emergent way of thinking about it. And so I think she's going to bring that to our conversation today around AI. And her topic is uh, during the call is going to name the forces that shape meaning as we explore emerging archetypes of influence, the erosion of epistemic depth, and the quiet rebellion of intellectual integrity. So our goal is to reclaim our important role as stewards of outcomes and understanding. So that's a little bit of a botched intro, but not too bad.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the invitation to be here. As Kathy knows, this topic of craft intelligence has been on my mind for a very, very long time. Studying craftsmen has been part of my postdoc years and years ago, and it's come up again and given me the opportunity to look at this from a different angle. And when Kathy and I were noodling on a topic, a couple of just interesting dynamics were afoot when I was writing some blog pieces and I was watching ideas kind of waft around the internet. I don't know how else to say it. You know how you see one idea kind of get co-opted and move around, or poorly cited, or we've all seen this idea of sort of sloppy writing. Does anyone know what I'm talking about? Like repeated articles or poorly cited articles or copied articles or that kind of stuff. And so like influencers or different personas on the internet, right? And it just made me curious about how ideas move around. And so I'm here because I'm watching these different kinds of debates happen in the business space and in the academic space. And AI is changing what counts as learning and doing. And what counts as competency or fluency has been commoditized. But there are characteristics that haven't been, like ethics and judgment and reasoning. And across classrooms and organizations, I'm seeing the same pattern. speed and polish can look like understanding. And I think that that's risky. Um, our work, I think our work is to keep meaning intact and to steward how knowledge is created, tested, applied, and shared. And so people don't just perform certainty, that they practice judgment. So today I'm going to offer some plain language practices that you can do today, some just small habits that you can form to make reasoning visible, credit the roots of ideas, and widen who counts as authoritative to keep context and values in the room when the pressure is high. And before I get started, I'm just curious how many people have played with AI at all, just like show of hands. And okay, everyone has. So there's some familiarity in the room. Okay. And are we generally pro AI or anti AI? Like, where's the general sentiment? Is there thumbs up? Okay. Is there anyone who's okay, moderate, neutral? Anyone who's like staunchly against? And that's okay. It does, like, this is a safe room. Like, I've seen it all. No one's really against it. Maybe a lean against somewhat. Okay. We'll talk about that a little bit as well. And so we're going to talk about why this matters now. AI hasn't just added new tools, it's changed how learning and judgment happen. The models predict, but they don't understand. Platforms and policies push quick, polished outputs, often at the expense of lineage, context, and deliberation. And so if we don't teach counter practices, we graduate people who look right under pressure rather than who decide well. And this happens in the workplace as well. And today is about restoring visible stewardship to how we make and share knowledge. And so there's 4 perils that I'll talk about: the sort of form over substance, erasing lineage and collaborators from work. And these are things we've seen for years, like someone taking a presentation and putting their name on it. Like that happened all the time in just in regular life. Using reach as a proxy for rigor and cultural narrowing. And then from this idea of promise to practice, shifting from procedural literacy to complexity literacy by installing these counter practices. And I'll talk about a few of them in the worksheet, codifies them just as sort of a note taker for you, and reminder. So the fix isn't more slides, or it's just different habits. And that's always been the case. As we move from how to use a tool to how we govern the conditions under which knowledge is made. So I'll just try to breeze through this because I want to also open up for conversation. And if you have questions or you want to talk while we're going through this, please use the chat and stop me if there's something that you want to pause on. So there's 3 forces are reshaping the ground beneath leadership education. First is capability is being defined outside the academy by policy and platforms faster than we can vet. Second, that shift recasts learning and experience as performance. Fluency and polish start to stand in for judgment. And these conditions surface these debates that we can all feel, sort of fluency versus understanding, autonomy versus accountability. So like models can be eloquent, but they can be wrong. We must teach people to integrate outputs and not admire them. Autonomy versus accountability. So instead of asking what kind of mind deserves autonomy, and I was just in this pretty big debate with somebody on LinkedIn about this very question, we have to ask where must autonomy stay bound by human and moral architecture that keeps the responsibility legible. Alignment versus governance. Alignment is technical and governance is institutional and human, and you need both or you get pretty big failures. And there's a big debate on, there's some people out there that feel that like causal AI is the answer to all solutions. Like we need to automate all governance and it can be done in a tool. And governance is about ethics and situational these policies are about situational concerns, and causal AI can't determine those, because it requires context. So open versus closed. Openness affects security, access, and innovation. Closed systems centralize power. So this is a policy choice and not a law of nature. Data provenance and consent, like who owns, who is credited for or compensated for the data. Stewardship must make lineage visible. Evaluation and context. Benchmarks travel poorly. Good enough has to be defined where the work actually lives. So these debates set up the 4 predictable perils that we'll walk through next, and the counter practices that keep judgment, lineage, accountability in the room. So I'm just sort of laying the groundwork.
So, Christine, can we just hang out on that slide slide one more time? So you're using some interesting language here that isn't usually part of our leadership conversation, for example, like lineage, as if knowledge and ideas have a province, so to speak, like a piece of artwork or whatever. And is that kind of part of the language of AI these days, or people who are
Well,
asking these kind of intersections of ethics and practice?
lineage is the language of data and information management.
Okay.
And data has lineage, data has provenance, data comes from somewhere. Structured and unstructured data has a line, right? And in order to reverse engineer where it comes from, to know if it's clean, to understand if it's okay to trust, to buy into its quality, it has to have lineage that you can understand. And that's where transparency, that's where explainability, all those trust terms that get thrown around, can we explain AI? Can we rely on it? Like, well, we don't know if we can't trust its lineage.
And honestly, I haven't, go ahead, Daniel.
I'm just wondering, is this a little bit similar to in academia or anywhere citing your sources, right?
Yes.
That gives that trust. That's the academic world or writing world equivalent to the data world of lineage.
Yes. Yes. Very much. It's the same.
Got it. Thank you.
But I have to say, I haven't seen a lot of sourcing or articulation of lineage around data facts that show up in newspapers or online or even in organizations. And is that something that I'm just not seeing because of where I'm intersecting, and it's actually a robust practice? Or
Well, it's a, where am I using it here? Did I use it in my speaking notes or my slide notes? Is it on the slide or did I say it? Speaking. Okay. I used it as a way to explain it. Let me see where I linked it to. So I'm just trying to find where lineage, provenance, and consent. So who owns it, who's credited for it, compensated, data, stewardship, and make lineage visible. So that's around credit. This is where copyright, the debates around copyright and compensation, and where all of the crediting authors and all the debates around your fair use and all that stuff, that's lineage. And it may be a back of house term. It may be something that people in information management use. I don't know. The terms are in a lot of flux right now. It used to be like every 10 years they would dredge the lake for fresh terms to be using, right? And it was business intelligence, and then it was all about data science, and now AI is all over everything. The sort of academic terms for these things are, it's data quality and lineage is the appropriate term. That is, like Daniel said, it's like citing your sources. It's being able to trace the appropriate, I mean, lineage is the only way I can think of it. This trace the appropriate line. Like Kathy wrote this book, the compensation for this material, this use of this material goes to Kathy. If Facebook uses this in their, if they slurp up Kathy's material, Kathy gets a penny a page, right? You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, but I don't see that anywhere close to reality.
No, it's not reality. I'm just saying, but that's what lineage is. If I were to give an example of how it's being used, this author and copyright thing that's going on right now in terms of
How it could be used or how it is actually used.
right? It's about citation. It's about being able to reverse engineer where data comes from. It's being able to explain how data transfers through your system, transforms through your system.
I get what you're at, where you're going to. I'm just having a hard time thinking of data that I've run into packaged in a leadership team or a board of actually having any of that stuff transparent. Data.
That by definition. So anything that an executive looks at has been transformed multiple times. It has been calculated multiple times. If it's been calculated, it has been transformed, and it requires lineage to get through the system. It didn't come in that way. It came in through raw log files. I mean, we're getting into the weeds here, but it came in through, and that's a different presentation. It came in through raw log files as one thing, and it came out as another. And that's what the executive looks at. The executive looks at a measure that has been transformed, could be 8 times by the time that it gets through the system. And the lineage is the path that log file took to become a KPI.
Mary Ellen, you've got your hand up.
I do, because in my PhD program at Coastal, we just finished a course on big data and data-informed decision-making as opposed to data-driven decision-making.
Yeah.
And I appreciate, Christine, what you're trying to present, but I think it's far more sophisticated than the majority of academic institutions are at this point. I think the basic questions that academia is asking is how do we acknowledge and offer use of AI in an integrity balanced environment with students, that yes, there are governance plans on campus. We are acknowledging that AI, at least at Coastal, is something that we want to regard as positive. However, recognizing that the technology is moving much more quickly than we are. And I think you've hit on those points, but the language is something that I think most people who are not deeply involved in this are going to be challenged with. It's a topic that is being wrestled heavily within academia because it's setting up a need to take another look at the relationship between faculty and students. B, what kinds of data are we collecting on students and how are we applying it, and where are we retaining that? So I think in many ways we are in a more simplistic era, and we need to be right now, in that we have so much data currently on students. The motivation for retaining it and using it is being examined ever more closely. At the same time, acknowledging, and I'm using this word intentionally, that we have to regeneratively examine how technology is being used in academia on an ethical basis, and still enabling a student and a faculty not to have an antagonistic relationship about the credibility of the work that is being presented.
I think I'll just jump in for a second. I think this is really fascinating, and it feels like we're deep diving in one section that Christine presented. So I'm going to offer Christine, if you want to keep moving, because you kind of had a flow to this that I think was a little bit integrated approach. I think this is a really interesting side note around lineage and data and this information-rich environment that Mary Ellen was talking about. But it's your show, Christine. So if you want to keep going down this path, feel free, or you can bring it back
No,
to the arc that you had.
I don't actually, because we're getting into the debates that I'm trying to fly over. Because I'm into those. I'm in those debates every day. And so I'm very familiar with them. And this is what they're debating, and she's right. Mary Ellen's right. They are going back and forth on this, and the data driven, data informed, and how do we do it ethically, and there are these polls that people are pulling against, both in business and in the academic space, and in every sector. And how do we do it right? And there are and so I'm trying to find this balance, and I'm almost reluctant to even continue on the slides, because I don't want people to index on the language too much. And I was going to kind of do a problem and kind of maybe, identify it with one of the perils and kind of go through it. Maybe even that's too much, but I can kind of drift through some of the patterns that I'm seeing of in the workplace, in the academic space. There are these pressures of performance, speed, rank, and reinforcing defaults. In the business space, it's kind of, show me the win, show me the numbers, give me the answer now, like give me the right answer, give me the answer first. If it ranks, it counts. Like you see that in LinkedIn all the time. These rankings, these algorithms are, they're bumping, and it's not necessarily the best content that wins. And reinforcing defaults, we're seeing that everywhere, right? I mean, these are basic pressures that we're seeing that are pushing performance over judgment. Performance I'm using loosely. I don't mean that as good performance. I just mean that as a result. It's pushing results over judgment, or results over what's the right word? I'm saying judgment, but and there's patterns. There's certain archetypes that are feeding into that, right? Like there's these optimizer behaviors that are mapping to those pressures, and they do it well, right? Optimizers are, they perform to a checklist and they're hitting those KPIs. Or there's extractors that can synthesize data really quickly, and they don't it's not like they don't care where the data came from, but they're not always citing the sources. They'll credit it later maybe, or they'll backfill the reasoning, but they're pushing forward. There's framers that can make content very viral, and we need them. Like they can it's almost like they can make everything sound like a fortune cookie, and they can make it they can get a lot of uptake, but it's not like, but they don't credit it that Socrates said it, right? they wrap it, right? But they don't always cite it. And I've seen that a lot with influencer copy. I'm like, that's from Meg Wheatley. Like, I've seen that before. And they're wrapping it up in their own garb, as if, and it's like they're putting one over on someone almost, right? And we need people who can flatten things, but they're taking away the provenance of it. And in that act, I think there's some disconnect. And then the preservationist there's some purist behaviors going on where they're preserving things, they're reinforcing defaults, and using standards, but that can leave out wider circles. So I talk about, and I guess I'm oversimplifying here. I'm going a little fast too. Let me get back to my notes here. So I talk about surface drift when speed and polish passes proof that AI makes things easy. The fix here is cognitive transparency, where to show your work with the sources and assumptions and the aftercare. So using a 2-minute template, and this is where the worksheet comes in handy. Using the 2-minute template where decisions, criteria, sources, and who's missing from the conversation and what assumptions and trade-offs are happening are helpful. This type of hygiene often doesn't happen when executives are enamored with a pretty dashboard, or a student is putting together a paper with AI and it looks better than what they've done themselves. That type of slowing down and like checking the sources and figuring out who's missing from the conversation, like they often just take it and go. At least that's what I've seen in the classroom, and that's what I've seen in the workplace. And you don't get them to slow down. And so getting them to question assumptions and trade-offs and do the aftercare on these things takes time. So fast is fine. It's just taking things at face value is not. And I don't see them practice the skepticism needed to go deeper with these results. So the core point here is that when we're rushed and we start judging work by how it looks instead of how well it's reasoned, AI makes it easy to turn in and approve something that looks polished but hasn't been checked. And that epistemic, that knowledge drift is form over substance. So that's one thing that's one peril I wanted to point out. And I think we've all seen this as a common problem with AI, which is why I wanted to land this one first, because it's so common. I just want to pause on this one just to understand if that's something that is landing. Is that a point that's landing?
Yeah, and I would even say this was happening before AI.
Yes.
When the pressure is speed and performance and impress the boss,
yeah,
people would make things look pretty and they wouldn't necessarily be able to back it up.
Yeah, this happened with Excel. It's just happening on steroids now, because AI is natural language and it's cross-discipline. And I think it makes it a bit more, it proliferates more now than just numbers data. All right, so I'll go into the second one. The second one is about extraction. That's when ideas get lifted out of the relationships that made them, like AI summaries and crisp decks, and the roots just vanish. The output looks authoritative, the origins are gone. Why this matters: when lineage disappears, when the people and communities who did the thinking disappear too. Trust erodes and incentives tilt to polish over participation, and learning turns into personal branding. This happens when people are managing reputations over kind of the citations that got them there. And we also lose our ability to revisit or repair decisions because we can't see who to go back to. So red flags like group work becomes a solo final with no credits, or slides read like a fresh insight, but sources, peers, and community inputs are invisible, or human plus AI inputs are blended with no attribution. These things are starting to become more common. And the promise in terms of what we're aiming for is more dialogic authorship. So treat authorship as stewardship, make the roots more visible, credit collaborators, and keep knowledge tied to its sources. And so this is where the relational integrity exercise comes in, where we replace the lone byline with the authorship map and a tiny lineage note, kind of the co-authorship credit, who contributed, the type of peer, mentor, AI, text, oral sources, specific contribution, how was it acknowledged, how was consent obtained, any unresolved questions, how is this informed by? These are things that often don't get asked. So just don't cite it, but like show the village that made the idea possible. And it takes a village is like not even a concept when these things get put together. It's like I did it myself. This like Horatio Alger thing, I see all the time. I got the answer all by myself, when actually it took a conversation of 6 people contributed to that frame for an idea. Does that make sense? And they don't get credited for it. And this one lone person comes out like they invented fire.
Actually, this is actually exactly what happens in hierarchies in leadership. You know, we always credit up, and you never really see all of the contributors that have created, you know, whether it's the quarterly results or the contributed to fulfilling organizational purpose.
I think this also happens to women a lot, where, you know, you see the editors behind the men, like Carl Jung's wife, and, you know, the women are invisible in this process. And there's a lot of invisible editing that happens in academic journals, where the editor is actually seeding a lot of ideas with the author, and guiding them. And that is invisible work, and quiet work. And but there's a lot of quiet work that's like not in ideas stuff that AI, it just get the context is getting lost, and AI doesn't have that context. And if it's not credited somewhere, it's getting lost, and it needs to get captured somehow. And it's not about so much credit me. It's not about that. It's about, it has to get captured somehow, because if it's not captured, it's not accounted for. If it's not accounted for, it doesn't get coded. If it doesn't get coded, it doesn't get, it doesn't, it's like it doesn't count. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Well,
I'm wondering a couple of things. One is, like, you named that this too has been happening. AI has supercharged it. And if it's not being accounted for or captured, then it's completely invisible. I wonder what in our culture, in our business world, in our society makes individuals feel like they need the credit. And I'll just admit vulnerability here. As an owner of a company, I sometimes don't know what I'm supposed to do, because I'm not doing the work like I used to. My team is doing the work, but I have to speak about the work they're doing, and I want to give them credit for it. And there comes a moment in time where I'm like, well, why am I even here? Because they're doing all the work. So this might be too much of a sidetrack, so we don't have to go down it, but just naming the emotional experience of the individuals who are taking credit without the lineage being named. Is there a fear that if they name everybody else or the AI or what helped them, do they lose their job? Do they become invaluable because all they did was present somebody else's assimilation of ideas? So I wonder if there's a missing piece here about how do we help the people who are using it and presenting it as their own work understand that what their role is in perhaps curation or asking the questions, and give them value in that piece so that they don't feel undervalued if they're giving everybody else credit.
I hear what you're saying, and I think that there's a that's the underlying fear of being replaced, right?
Yeah, that's well said.
And so let me address that with the idea of craft intelligence, which is the North Star that I'm trying to point to, right? And and we're leaping ahead just a little bit, but there is this idea of if not then, right? That that somehow if they get, I can't have. And I just don't see the pie that way. That's a scarcity mindset. And it's a it's a zero sum, it's a zero sum game. AI is an enablement tool that is exponential to infinity. And that's I mean, honestly, that is the blessing and curse of it. And that you have people taking work off your plate is a good thing. That you are able to give credit for people doing a good job is a good thing. And it is a compliment to you creating a system that they're effective, meaning you're actually doing your job. Because if they weren't, you wouldn't be doing your job, which means you have balance. You're doing your job, they're doing their job. It means you're being a good leader, that you're creating an effective workplace, right? See, if you were using AI, what kind of ecosystem could you build? Now, think of yourself supercharged, because that's the promise of the tool. What kind of, and I'm making this up, what kind of ecosystem could you build onto that business that would be, I don't know what you're doing, but like that would be bigger, interdependent, bigger, still healthy, small is beautiful. I'm thinking Schumacher, right? But like what would you build differently that would grow along with you as a human being, not sell out like global growth, but like what's your next step as a leader in that business that AI could assist you with? Because that's your next step. Because when you're ready to ask, is the AI replacing me, or am I feeling inferior? It's the time to grow with the tool, not for the tool to replace you. That's my argument. That's my premise. That's the premise I'm operating from, where craft intelligence is there to enhance and not replace. There are tasks that it will replace naturally, but there are certain skills that it isn't meant to replace. And that is your journey to self-actualization. You as a leader, you as a human being, right?
Christine, I really find the visual here very compelling, because this morning I was on a coaching call with a group that whose senior VP that is in charge of their territory has been promoted within the organization, and they're trying to decide, their default is to replace her as she gets promoted to a more global role. But her knowledge of her team is, I think they could lead this whole initiative in this continent by themselves, which is a totally different, image than the typical hierarchy of,
Right.
replacing a senior VP with another senior VP. So what the visual has brought to me is that this is a problem that also scales. It doesn't just scale with AI, it also scales to the way we conceptualize leadership and what's possible and what isn't possible. And our algorithms that are putting things together also have a cultural kind of province as well, right? They have been written within a cultural and gender and
Exactly.
culture context.
We have
And
been,
so they're showing up, they're amplifying certain outcomes, right? Okay.
exactly. We have been conditioned to try to outrun machines since the Industrial Revolution, and that bias exists where we have been taught to try to automate ourselves out of a job, but not to actualize with our tools. Craftsmen are actualizing with their tools. And AI could be that type of tool. I mean, more so than almost any other tool. And instead of us thinking about automating it automating us out, which is what a lot of people think about, these causal AI solutions of efficiency and productivity. And it is a tool for that, no doubt. But it could also be an amplification of, if you have 1,000 people and you teach them how to use it well and how to amplify what they're doing. And instead of Daniel's concern about it replacing me, but it amplifying my cause in life, my purpose in life, how to help me think bigger about what I can do for myself, my community, my business, right? How to solve problems. How do I take this to the next level? Not to become McDonald's, like not to create a cancerous business, but to create a business that's actually solving something, or generating something, generatively creating something. That's a real co-creating partner, like a co-creating problem-solving partner. And where do you get that type of McKinseyan help? You don't. I mean, who can learn to turn this tool around and flip it instead of seeing it as an adversarial thing that you have to outrun and try to outthink and hide in your back pocket? And so that's why I'm like, cite it, share your prompt, like help other people, like make the tribe bigger. So I'll need to breeze through some of the rest of these, and then we can chat more. So reach and rigor. Let's see here. So this one is when the feed becomes the truth. So rank makes things look real. So on the left is the thing that wins the attention, and on the right is the thing that holds the evidence. So in that drift, so this was a report that went out that like the UN publishes, like, I don't know, some obscene amount of reports, and then no one reads them. And so so the counter would be distributed legitimacy. Assume the authority is spread across the networks and not just amplified across sources. The habit then is the knowledge ecosystem mapping with a quick 3 and 3 source check. Who holds relevant knowledge, including grassroots voices, where it lives beyond search results, how it flows, formal and informal, and compare the AI list with alumni, community, and practitioner inputs, and then what's missing. And I just for interest here, the average American aged 20 to 34 spent 6.6 minutes reading daily. They have the attention span, I think, for when we were putting education videos for a class curriculum I was building, it was something like we had to make the teaching videos something like under 2 minutes. So with that, and the UN is still cranking out under an old model, something from what, 20 years ago. They're still publishing reports, like, I don't know, 25-page reports that no one reads. So they're not scoping to the habits that people have today. So we need the framer's gift, right? Making things travel, but without letting visibility and replacing validity. So just something to think about as we think about the things that are viral, and you see the thing. I mean, because you can't not see, because they've made it viral, so it's in your feed, the carousels and the stupid things that come through. I'm like, I watch it, I tip my hat, but I also am like, how did it get here? What made it? What went into it? And who ripped it off? Like how did this, this is not organic food in here. right? So, and the last one, this is just a clip from Eddie Izzard. I don't know if anyone knows his comedy, but he has a little clip about the British conquering India, and do you have a flag? They're like, we've lived here for 1,000 years, and he's like, well, do you have a flag? And they're like, well, no. Then like, well, we take the, they decide what counts, basically. And so this is about cultural narrowing. So when we let defaults like English language, digitization, text first sources define what counts, we inherit those limits. And so AI systems amplify those defaults. And so what's easy to find starts to stand in for what's true and relevant. And why that matters, we miss the people who live the problem, the proximity to the problem. And decisions look rigorous on paper, but land poorly in context. And trust erodes because local or indigenous knowledge holders see their contributions erased or treated as not real sources. And now that actual whole websites are being wiped off, it doesn't even matter if it was digitized. It's just being erased. So the red flags to watch is AI built reading lists that look global in name, but only name Western authors, or no sources available when oral histories, community minutes, or practitioner know-how exist. Stakeholder maps that mirror the org chart, but not actual influence networks. And we say add citations when the issue is recognizing non-textual contributions. And so the promise in terms of what's in the worksheet, just sort of plural epistemic futures, broadening who and what counts as knowledge so that leadership stays accountable to the people affected. And so you want to run a decolonial lineage practice using an inclusion checklist. And so this would talk about at least one non-Western or indigenous local source or voice, or make an oral or non-textual contribution visible. Note who said what, when, and how consent was given, use community preferred names, and invite a local participant or a local review of the draft, and attach a 50-word lineage note or some sort of description to the deliverable, and what this builds on and who reviewed it and what remains uncertain, to preserve the information. And then this brings us to, let's see here. I just want to wrap this up for us so that we can get into some dialogue. This brings us into the North Star, which we were alluding to earlier, that under pressure, it shows the work, honors the lineage, widens who counts, and plans the aftercare. And the kit is simple: decision ledger, co-authorship, the ecosystem map, the lineage inclusion, the idea that fast is fine, but face value isn't, and sorry. Just so that gives that whole picture. But it's not enrichment, it's infrastructure for ongoing stewardship. And then I'll end it there. You're on mute, Kathy.
This is bigger than what we created space for your conversation. Because I think there's definitely lots of interesting places to go down.
Yeah.
I want to open it up to people on, what's peaked for you in terms of, there's a lot of meat here that I know that's triggered my thinking, but I'm curious what other people have thought.
And have at it, because what started as a very informal conversation with Kathy and myself turned into a paper, and the paper got accepted. And so I thought, well, I'll just make a presentation out of the paper. So
my reaction would be, so thank you for sharing. You articulate things that I intuitively know a bit or have experienced. Yeah. So for example, if I if I have some data and I ask them what's the source, and I get the source, and I go to the source, it's not there, and all these things. Yeah, it's all. Yeah, I'm curious to what extent the countermeasures you're suggesting will be viable in this world. Yeah, whether people have the discipline to start doing it.
Yeah, me too. Well, it's measures that we used to do. These are things that we used to consider standard practice several years ago, and they don't seem to be standard practice anymore. And I'm kind of curious why.
Precisely as you say, it looks so authoritative. And the moment you're going to dig, you need to be an expert to see what's right and what's good, and what needs to be filtered out. Yeah. So, but if you are a layman, you are blown away by it.
Yeah. I think the scary thing is when I see students look at their homework and run a prompt, run their homework through it, and they'll get a paper that looks better than what they would have done. And they'll just hand that in versus even being curious on making that initial output better. Or even a work product, like run a question for a work thing through and just take that and not play with it. I mean, not even see it as a cat toy. Like, just they don't even want to bat at it. And that just not even pawing, that part I think is concerning.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and Christine has multiple books out. Frank, you're a writer. You have books and articles and more, another book in the works. And as an author, the idea that your work is getting gobbled up without permission, credit, it is a little disturbing as well.
Yeah. And therefore, it's great you raise all these points to create awareness of it.
Mm-hmm. But
Well, I know
there is a deep ethical frame here that's, I think, I wrote this piece 25 years ago called The Ecology of Leadership. And one of the frames we used for the paper to set up the reason why we needed to think about leadership differently was all of the radical changes that were going on in technology and health and social and ecological issues, etc. But our ability as humans to keep pace with an ethical and kind of grow the wisdom to manage all of these kind of fast growing tensions, and they all pose ethical dilemmas. And we thought one of the biggest adaptive challenges was whether we could keep up with, I think somebody else, was that you, Sonia, that said the same thing? It's like, how do we keep up with the speed at which this is unfolding? And I think it's going to be interesting to watch. And I kind of wonder, where are we in the story? Are we halfway through? And there's where it looks like the outcome's going to go one way, but there's still half the story to continue. And maybe we come out at the other end of it with a totally different result than what we think is showing halfway through. I don't know. There's a lot of interesting tensions and provocative ideas that you've brought to us. We have less than a minute to say goodbye. Anybody else want to share before we scoot?
I just wonder about what you said, Kathy, too, that Christine, there's such richness here. My mind is just spinning the consequences of what you shared. And I wonder about our opportunity to bridge this conversation and just hold it and remember it for Terry next month. Like, what does it mean for leadership and the way that she sees it? And I don't know, this comes up for her, I can't quite remember, but there's something about us, I think about our evolution, right? I mean, we're just not evolutionarily involved to like work this fast, right? We're not like, this is not our design. And so what is it? What kind of an edge is it that we're bumping into? And maybe that's something that we can, with Terry's lens, that we can sort of mesh the two here together and create some leadership talk about this next month too, because it's just, Christine, it really it blows my mind. And yeah, there's not enough time for me to reflect today, but I just really appreciate it. So thank you. Just trying to create a bridge for next month.
This probably means we need to bring Christine back after we've processed it for a while and
Yeah,
to have the next conversation
yeah.
means
around that.
I wasn't sure how much setup was needed because I wasn't sure how much AI foundation to provide.
Oh, very, very great. Well, we
Yeah.
are out of time, and we will, I think we need you to come back and
Mhm.
you know, kind of
Yeah.
keep so we can go deeper into the
Yeah,
conversation and
love
the
to.
implications.
I
Yeah.
would love to.
That'd be
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, I would
Okay.
love.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you
Very
so
Thank you,
much.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
You.
Thank
Take
you
care.
so much.
All right.
Okay, bye.
Thank you.
Bye, folks.
Bye.
Do you want
And
to?
then- huh? What?
Did you want to? You want to? It's recording.
Thank you.